Welcome to a new episode of the Sports Mecca podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Abramo. As always, I'm joined by my co host, Sam Hengeli. Today, we are joined by two-time Olympic swimmer and eight-time Olympic medalist, Regan Smith. Regan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this evening.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm looking forward to having a fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned before we started recording, you are our first Olympic swimmer to come on the podcast. We've had some Olympic athletes, but first swimmer. Uh, so your schedule's always constantly changing. It's been very busy. We have a lot to discuss, but first, talk to us about recently you competed in the World Cup in Singapore the last couple weeks in October and then early November. Talk to us about that and then taking home the world records in the 100-meter and 200-meter backstroke.
Yeah, thank you for asking about it. So, yeah, the World Cup series is something that in the swimming world it happens every year in the fall after the big international meet that swimming has every summer. And so this summer we had the Olympics, obviously, and so the World Cup's preceding that. It's honestly just all about having fun. Like the people who go to these series after the Olympics, they haven't really been training terribly hard. They just kind of want to have an opportunity to travel to some new places, see some international friends that they don't get to see very often, and compete with like little to no pressure on them. And I love swimming, but as with any sport, it's not as fun when you have a lot of pressure on you, right? And so I really wanted the opportunity to compete freely, and without any stakes or anything like that. So I thought that the World Cup would be like a perfect opportunity to do that. And so I went with one of my closest friends, Kate Douglas, who is an Olympic champion in the 200 breaststroke from Paris. And we went overseas, and we got there October 13th. Our first week was in Shanghai, China. First competition was there. Second week, we went to Incheon, South Korea. And then our third week was in Singapore. And then I got back from Singapore yesterday. So, it was a long trip, but it was so much fun. And I went into it like really having no idea how I was going to perform. Because to be completely honest with you, I haven't done much of anything since Paris. I've been swimming and I've been lifting weights, but I really haven't been taking things very seriously. I've been showing up when I can, but I'm missing practices here and there. I've been traveling a lot, spending a lot of time with family. So I have not been locked in like I was before Paris at all. So I didn't know if I was in shape or if I was strong, and I just didn't know how it was going to go. But I was okay with that because this meet, like I said, is a no pressure situation and it's just about having fun. And so I was very pleasantly surprised with how I was able to perform. And I think my biggest takeaway from this series of meets is so much of performing your best, swimming fast, breaking world records has to do with up here, your mental game. Because you can prepare physically all you want, like you can be in tip-top shape, ready to rip, but like if you don't have it up here, or if you're not enjoying the process, if you're not having fun while doing it, like you're just gonna fall flat on your face. And from a physical standpoint, I was not prepared for this World Cup meet at all. Like if I was my physical self right now in Paris, I would have done absolutely atrociously terrible. But I think I was able to do so well at this World Cup meet because I had such a light and carefree mentality. And so I think that taught me a lot about myself and just how mental sports are. So that was like a very good learning experience for me. But it was so much fun. Love seeing new places. Love competing. Um, yeah, it was really great. I'd like to do that series again because they do it annually and they do it in different parts of the world each year. So this year it was in Asia, last year it was in Europe. And I think next year they're wanting to do it in the Americas. So I think that would be super fun. But yeah, it's a great series of competitions to go to.
Mhm. Mhm. So once you finished the Paris Olympics in August, and you talked about not it's there's a difference of the mentality locking in.
Mhm.
Uh, when did you get out of that moment? Like once it was all finished in Paris, when did all that mental drain, that those emotions start to come out, and then you just were back to being normal?
Yeah, I think you like I lost like sight of how like locked in I was. Like I said, 'cause yeah, just for months and honestly years, like it's like the biggest goal, it's what you're thinking about. And I would say like from probably March until end of July, I was just so focused. Like it was just my 24/7 job. And swimming is my career anyways, but it was just on a whole nother level of like making sure everything was perfectly prepared and mentally I was all right. Physically, I was in the best shape of my life. And so then, yeah, after that, I think the release was pretty immediate. Like as soon as competition in Paris was over, I really wanted to just decompress. So I flew home like right after the games were over, and I spent some time with my family. I also went on vacation. I went to Turks and Caicos with two of my really good friends for a couple of days too, just to like decompress that way. And just like take some time to like process all the emotions that I probably was like putting on the back burner while I was preparing for the games. And then like sitting with like my feelings about my performance about the games as well. So I would say that happened pretty immediately after the games ended, and I just gave myself a couple weeks to like sit with my feelings and like enjoy myself, and then like kind of move on as well. Because I think it's important to like process your feelings and process your performance and how everything went, but it's also important to not dwell on anything for too long. Because I think high level athletes, nothing's ever enough for us, right? Like we always want more, more, more. And like even if we had the best performance of all our lives, we'll still find something to critique about ourselves because that's how you become the best, right? Um, and so I think I didn't want to like beat myself up, I guess, over my performances and things that I fell short in for too long. So I gave myself a few weeks to sit with those different feelings. But then after that, I was like, okay, like put that away now. Like you're a human being, right? And there's so much more to life than that. So let's put it away because we've been focused for a really long time, and now let's like be a regular college human being. And I think I did a pretty good job of that this year. I gave myself a lot of grace.
Mhm. So, with swimming, it's a different aspect, different sport than, let's say, if you're on the Olympic basketball team or Olympic water polo team, for instance. It's more, I mean, you have some of the relays, but for the most part, it is a lot of individual events. Uh, what's really that big difference for you as a swimmer, just that mental focus on just yourself instead of the team in general?
Yeah, I think, and I'm relatively ignorant because I've never played a team sport, so I don't want to like speak on things that I ultimately have no experience with. But from what I can tell, I feel like individual sports are much more mentally difficult than team sports. And my only experience with that is, as you mentioned, relays. So when I swim an individual event, I am far more nervous than when I'm swimming as a part of a relay because I think there's something so comforting about having teammates behind you who are supporting you and who are helping you, in that moment. Because yeah, when you're swimming, like it's just you. Like all you can hear is the whoosh of the water in your ears. And so it's not like, well, when you're on the court or the field and you can like hear the fans screaming and you can hear your teammates like yelling cues to you or whatever, your coaches, like you can't hear anything. It's literally just you and your thoughts and your competitors in the lane next to you. And so that makes it insanely mentally difficult. And few people are able to like really master things mentally in swimming because of how individual it is and because it's literally all up to you. And so I think relays really do help take a couple ounces of pressure off because even though you're still swimming your leg of the relay by yourself, when you're behind the blocks, you have three people who would do anything for you, And so that's like very, very comforting. But it is just so, so different on the mental side. I would say personally, than a team sport is. And that's not to say that team sports aren't incredibly mentally difficult in their own right, but I just think in swimming in particular, I think is just so different because yeah, you can't hear anything. It's just you and the intrusive thoughts that you get when like your fight or flight is activated. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting, and I think it's something that not a lot of people think about, but it's very difficult.
Hmm. Now, in this year's Paris Olympics, you took home medals in the 100-meter and 200-meter backstroke, the 200-meter butterfly, and the 4 by 100-meter relay. But you took home your first ever Olympic gold medal in the 4 by 100 relays. For you, all the other medals that you won were in the, just as I mentioned, in the 2024 Olympics, and then the 2021 were silver up until the 4 by 100. Did you feel different sort of validation or confidence, once you finally took home that gold medal after, having a lot of silver medals and coming just so close?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely difficult for me mentally to deal with that, but I think I struggled a lot more with not coming home with the gold in Tokyo than I did in Paris. Because back then in Tokyo, I let swimming completely define me. Like I thought that if I didn't win, I was nothing, and my entire identity and sense of self was based on how fast I could swim across the pool. And so I've come a long way and I've really changed my mentality about it. And so while yes, like winning gold, it was very emotional for me. I cried on the podium. Like it was a crazy moment. Like it's been my dream for my entire life. But also I wanted it so badly individually. Um, but I had to like just remind myself that like yeah, I came close a lot of times, but I also gave three performances in those individual events that I'm so incredibly proud of, and like I rose to the occasion and swam personal records, like times that I'd never swam before. And so I didn't want to only be concerned about the color of the medal around my neck because ultimately I can only control myself and how fast that I'm able to go. I can't control how fast my competitors are going. And so if I have an incredible swim, like the best swim of my life, but the person next to me was just able to go a little bit faster that day, like I can't beat myself up over it because I literally have no control over them. So I think that was able to give me a lot of peace. I think if I had had a quote unquote poor performance in one of my events and took home a silver when I think I knew that I could have taken home a gold had I had a quote unquote better performance, I think then I would have been struggling with it a lot more and I would have been really disappointed in myself, beating myself up a lot. But when I was having, those moments of like self-reflection, like in August after the games, I was always able to really confidently remind myself like how great that I was still able to perform, and how I shouldn't, beat myself up over something that was ultimately completely out of my control. So that's what I wanted to say about that. But circling back, yes, like that gold medal performance felt so different and it was so sweet to like end on a high note because the 4 by 100 medley relay was the very last event in swimming of the games. And so to go out like that, we won the gold medal and we broke the world record. So we went the fastest time that's ever been seen in the medley relay. Um, so that like it was just like an A plus ending to a really, really great week for me and for Team USA. So yeah, it was different, but also everything that I said prior to saying that is really important to me as well.
Hmm. I want to get your thoughts on being in the Olympic Village. Is it as prestigious as people like Sam and I would like make it out to be?
Are you being sarcastic?
Uh, I
It's
don't
okay if you're
know.
not. I'm curious.
No. I mean, like it sounds like it's some luxury place that you
No.
do everything. No?
Yeah, I fear not. It's the Olympics are, I always like to say they're optimal performance in suboptimal conditions. That's kind of what people say. But I also want to recognize like coming from the United States, like compared to a lot of countries that we see at the Olympics, we really grew up with a silver spoon in our mouths and we have it very good, right? And so we go to the village and we sleep on cardboard twin size beds, and we have, interesting food in the dining hall and like rocky living conditions, like six people in a three-bedroom suite with like low quality bathrooms, like very, very bare bones like situation. And it's not nice. Like it's not a five-star hotel by any means. It's like it's like your average college dorm room, I would compare it to. And so it can be very easy as like Americans who grew up, very fortunate to complain and be like, this sucks. Like, how am I supposed to swim? How am I supposed to win gold medals and like swim faster or, perform well, whatever sport you're doing in these conditions? Like, how am I supposed to do this? But then, you'll go into the dining hall where every single country is eating together, and you'll see countries that like, I had never even heard of before, and they are so grateful to be there. They're having meals that they probably never, like had the opportunity to taste before in their life. Seeing things and experiencing things that they never have before. And then it like really puts things into perspective to me of like how cool this is for some people and how like they would have given anything to have this experience, and now they finally have it. And then it makes me feel like a jerk for like complaining about the same conditions. So I always try to be gracious and like remember that, but also like to be like, no, like it's not luxurious. It's not a five-star resort by any means. It's just like, yeah, it's your very, very average college dorm and then big dining hall. And the food is fun, but I do think the best part of the whole thing is seeing all these different countries and all these people from these different backgrounds. And maybe that's a very cliche answer, but it really like especially this year in Paris, because in Tokyo with COVID, you didn't see people as often, because everyone was isolating when they weren't competing. So seeing it this year, like really put things more into perspective for me. And it helped me kind of, take a step back and be like, yikes, Reagan, like maybe realize how fortunate you are. And like you can still compete well, even if you're, you know, like sitting on a bed that's not the most comfortable bed ever. And sharing a bathroom with three girls when you're used to having your own bathroom. Like it's fun, you know what I mean? So it was very interesting to think of it that way. But um, you guys would probably think it's funny, like walking in there being like, yikes, like does LeBron James like have to sleep in these, dorm rooms in the village? Like this is, so when you think about it like that, it's like, oh my gosh. But yeah, so that's my spiel about that. It was a very interesting experience, I would say.
I'm glad that you provided that. I was thinking about it in my mind, like before I was going to ask. I'm like, I got to find out a little bit about this because, when you're not an Olympian, it's so tough to gauge, and we have these preconceived thoughts of what it is like. So
Yeah,
I'm glad that you provided some honesty with that.
yeah.
Um, I am, really curious, and this, a couple ways you can answer this. Bob Bowman is your coach. He coached Michael Phelps during his professional swim career. For you, what, in your point of view as an Olympic swimmer, what makes an elite swim coach, and how should swimmers like yourself or others who are wanting to compete make a decision in who they want to coach them?
That is such a good question. And I'll give another cliche answer before I start talking specifically about Bob. I do think like a lot of what makes like an Olympic swim coach is like it does come down to the athletes. I think like if you buy into what your coach is doing and you have natural talent and ability and you're eager to get better, most of the time like a coach who's excited about the same things as you are will get you there. So I think specifically for me, like I've seen so many different personalities in the coaching staff of the US Olympic swim team, and like things that like shouldn't mesh well together, and like just complete polar opposites, completely different methodologies, different training philosophies, different everything, and they still have incredible swimmers who have done amazing things, won Olympic gold medals. You know what I'm saying? So there's so many different shapes and sizes, which is really cool. But for me with Bob, what drew me to him was a couple of things. So I guess to give some context, I was at Stanford University for a year. Graduated college in 2020 or graduated high school in 2020 during COVID, deferred a year to let COVID settle down. Attended Stanford. I was a freshman in the fall of 21, and long story short, did not go well. The transition from high school to college is hard for everyone, regardless. Totally get that. But for me, I struggled primarily with the swimming aspect of it. I didn't click super well with my coach. I didn't agree with his training philosophy. I wasn't seeing results and progress, and I just mentally didn't buy into it. And so then after my freshman year, the summer of 2022, I was like, hey, I need to make a change. And I was talking with my high school coach. And he was like, I think you should look at Bob. And it was because he is very cut and dry. He's old school, but like in a very like new and exciting way. Like he believes in work. Like there's no fancy way to get better. Like you can't just like jump through all of these different hoops and try to think of all these new crazy ideas to get better. Like if you want to get better and get results, you need to train yourself aerobically and anaerobically and do good strength training, and you'll see results that way. And he knows how to create the best practices and training environments. Um, and so that just really, really drew me into him immediately. And then what got me to really stay and buy into what he was doing once I got to Arizona and started training under him, he is a psychology major, actually. He was a psych major in college. And so he really, really understands how people tick, like how people work, how they operate. And so he understands that like athletes aren't a one size fits all, and like his coaching styles isn't a one size fits all. So like one person might need a lot more tough love than someone else, right? Like someone might really need to be handled pretty aggressively and like get yelled at during practice if they're not going fast enough. Whereas someone else, like me, for example, if I get yelled at, I'm probably going to cry because I'm just like a really sensitive person, and I'm a goody goody, like at heart. So I'm never goofing off during practice. I'm always getting 110%. Like, so if I get yelled at, I'm basically like, oh my God, like, what more do you want me to do? Like, I'm always, you know what I mean? So I really respect Bob because he understands, like, okay, this is who I am as a person, but this is who my athletes are, and I need to coach them according to their personality. Like I can't just like be Bob and coach everyone in Bob's way. Like I want to be receptive to my athletes because I know that that's what's going to make them better. You know, like I don't want to fight fire with fire. I want to meet them halfway. And Bob is so good at that. And I think his reputation is that he is kind of a hothead, and he's pretty, like his relationship with Michael was very dicey for a really long time, and they went at it a lot, and that was very public. And so I was scared of Bob for a really long time because I just thought that he was this super tough guy and wrote insane workouts that were super hard. And the practice environment was like scary because he's like yelling at everyone. And so I was so scared when I showed up and started training with him. But then right away, when I started training with him, he was wonderful with me. He's very patient with me, even if he doesn't want to be, because he knows that's what works for me. He's great with, positive affirmations with me, supporting me during practice. Like if I'm doing bad, he won't yell at me. He just won't say anything. And so then I know that I need to like get my shit together. And then if I'm doing really well, he'll be supportive of me and give me words of encouragement and whatever else. So that for me was the game changer with Bob. And I just feel like I haven't seen that before because I feel like most people, it's like they're known for being like this, like a certain, like they're boxed into something. But I think he's very fluid with the way that he approaches his swimmers. And I really, really respect that about him.
Hmm. Last one I got before we'll transition to Sam's questions. Is it true that when you were 14, you started to compete in meets with, eventual Olympians Missy Franklin and Katie Ledecky?
Oh yeah, I mean they were already Olympians at the
Okay.
time that I
Well,
compete. Yeah, but I remember I competed against Missy when I was 13. That was the first time I competed against her. And that was in 2015. So she had already gone to London and won all of her gold. And same with Ledecky. So yeah, I had the opportunity to compete against really incredible people at a super young age, which was awesome.
yeah. How was it just at that young of an age, realizing you're competing with the Olympians or swimmers that have already reached that stage, and that really push you at all to reach that Olympic stage as well down the road.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, by the time I was 13, I knew that that was my dream, like 12, 13. And so like I was just incredibly like starstruck, having the opportunity to race them and like shake their hand after a race, after a competition. So it was very, very inspiring, very motivating. And I wanted to be just I like Missy was my idol growing up, so I wanted to be just like her growing up. So that was like very, very cool. And now at 22 years old, I have a very good relationship with Missy, and she's kind of like one of my mentors, which is insane because if 13-year-old me knew that, she'd be like on the floor. So it's very, very cool. It was awesome.
So, Reagan, I want to go back. You talked about how the mental aspect is very important to you more than the physical aspect. What is one thing you do to get yourself mentally ready for a competition?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am really big into working with my sports psychologist because I like am just a huge historically I've been like a mental head case, right? And it's so easy to let intrusive thoughts come in and self-doubt and just the voices in your head that are telling you negative thoughts can be so loud, especially when you're in a sport like swimming, as I mentioned, where it's just you and you don't have anyone else shouting positive things in your ear. And so when I started working with my sports psychologist, the thing that she always said to me was like, look at the facts of the situation, like look at things with the logical lens, do not look at things with an emotional lens. Because, like before a competition, it can be really easy to be like, I'm not good enough. I'm not prepared. Everyone else is like way more prepared than me. Like I'm gonna lose, like XYZ, yada, yada, yada. We could do this all day. And that's not logical at all, right? Like that's just looking through things with like an emotional lens, like you're freaking yourself out. And so she would be like, literally just like ask the most factual questions. Like whenever those like self-doubting comments come in, you have to look at yourself and say, am I prepared? Like, have I been going to practice? Like, have I been trying hard? Am I a talented swimmer? Um, have I done this before and succeeded? And the answer to all of that is yes. And so then it's like, whew, like, okay, like it looks like I'm gonna be like just fine, like just how I always am. And so that can help really ground me and calm my thoughts. So I always like even behind the blocks, I'll be like logic, not emotion right now. Like emotions are great, but there's a time and place for them. You know what I mean? And I feel like when you're competing, you almost kind of just have to be not a robot, but like kind of like you have to be like, this is how it is, like bam, bam, bam. And then once the race is over, you can be as emotional as you want, but beforehand, it's like, no, like what are the facts? Like look at things logically. So I always try to do that before I'm competing, and I think that helps get me in a good mental space.
Yeah. What does it feel like mentally when you have your best day? Like, how does it like feel? Like, how do you know when you're competing at like such a high level that like you're performing your best?
Yeah, it feels really good. And I think something that I've become more cognizant of as I've gotten older is I really like my mood is very dependent on how well I'm doing and like how good I like my self-esteem, how good I feel about myself is very dependent on how well I'm performing. And so I think that's something that this next year I really want to work on. Because like even when I was at World Cup, um, just this past couple of weeks, I noticed that I was in a better mood when I was like winning, or like if I set a world record, I was like on top of the world. And like it's so great to like be proud of yourself and those emotions, but it's also important to like also at the same time know that that doesn't define you because I feel like then it makes it really easy to have extreme highs and then extreme low crash downs, and I don't want that. Like life's too short to like be so down on yourself for something as silly as like swimming. You know what I mean? So it feels great, but also I'm really trying to work on having more of like a balance of like, that was so freaking cool what I just did, but also like I'm more than that because I think that will just help me in the long run. You know what I mean? Because like you're not going to win forever. You're not going to be at your peak forever. Like there's going to be a come down eventually. And I guess I'm just trying to protect myself from the inevitable, and also just remind myself that I'm a lot more than that. So yeah, it's super cool, but trying to have a healthier relationship with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your favorite moment competing in the Olympics?
I think it was probably the gold in the 4x1 medley when we broke the world record. Standing on that podium and like hearing the national anthem play with a gold medal around my neck and then getting to share that moment with my family right after was like really, really special. Um, like one of the coolest things that I've ever done. And I think it just made it all the more sweeter that I did get to celebrate it with my family. Just because in Tokyo, right, like no one got to go. So my
Right.
family was sitting at home on the couch in Minnesota while I was like God knows how many miles away in Tokyo, Japan by myself. So I think that was just super cool for all of us to like experience that together because we all wanted it so bad. Um, for me and for each other, and we wanted to experience it together. So I think that moment always stands out in my mind. Like I remember it very vividly, which is super cool.
That's awesome. That's very awesome. What was it like being on the boat with all the U.S. Olympic athletes during the ceremony?
Yeah, I wish I got to do that. So, unfortunately, opening ceremonies, it looks super cool on TV, right? But it's like a 6, 7 hour process, and you're walking for like miles and miles to get out of the village to get onto the boats. Then you're standing on your legs for a long time. And when you're like athletes about to like compete for medals and for your country, you're like, okay, shoot, is it really in my best interest to go and like stand on my legs for multiple hours and like you know what I'm saying? So our rule within USA Swimming was if you are competing within the first 4 days of the competition, you are not allowed to go to opening ceremonies. And I started competing on day three, so then I wasn't allowed to go. But a couple of my friends, like one of my friends, Alex Walsh, her first day of competition was on like day seven, I want to say. Since she got to go to opening ceremonies because she knew she'd have enough time to like recover from that big day because it's a pretty exhausting activity, opening ceremonies. Super fun, but it's tiring. So I didn't get to go, but I live streamed it with my teammates in the village, and so we got to watch it. But yeah, wish I could give you a better answer.
I did not know that at all.
Yeah,
That's very interesting. I'll have
yeah,
to think about that when during the LA Olympics in 2028 for sure.
yeah, yeah.
So, one fun fact about me, Reagan, is that I'm a, cross country coach at the high school
Oh, cool.
level, and one of our girls on our varsity team was is a going to be a Division 1 swimmer. Did you do any other sports in high school besides swimming? Did you run cross country or did track?
No, I didn't. I do really like to run though. I stopped doing all other sports by the time I was about 10 or 9, I think, but running was a big part of our like cross training. And so like th in all throughout high school, 3 times a week before our swim practice, our coach would have us run a 5K. And so I got pretty good at running. Um, like I don't know even what's good for a 5K, but as a swimmer, I feel like I could do them like in 20-ish minutes, which I think is like pretty dang good.
Oh,
Obviously not like competitive if you're actually a runner, but like for someone who doesn't do it, like I don't know. I think if I wasn't swimming, I would want to do something like cross country or track because I really do enjoy running. And like during the COVID pandemic, for example, when we couldn't train and all the pools were closed, I ran like all the time because I really do like it. But no, I never did it like competitively or anything. But I do still really enjoy it.
yeah, so if you ran a 20-minute 5K, you'd probably be on a varsity cross country team. I will say
Well,
that.
that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, if you say you run around 20 minutes, that's a pretty fast 5K for
Mm.
sure.
Probably not anymore, but in high school when we were doing it for months and months and months, like yeah.
Yeah. What is your favorite part of swimming?
Um, I think I enjoy the friendships in it. I started swimming and stuck with swimming because I was just like really excited to go like play with my friends at the pool. And now like to this day, all of my very best friends are swimmers. I maybe I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but like I don't really have any friends who aren't swimmers. Um, just because I feel like we really get each other like on a different personal level. And like the bonds that we form are just so different. Um, so I definitely would have to say it's the friendships for me.
That's awesome. Throughout your career, what are some of your favorite places you've traveled to for a competition?
That's a good question. I really enjoy Singapore a lot. I've been there a couple of times. I've been to Budapest a couple of times, really enjoy that. Gosh, I really like Tokyo too. So I'd probably say like one of those.
That's awesome. It's really cool that you've gotten the opportunity to travel all over the world just for competition. That's a very cool
Yeah.
thing for sure. My final question to you is, do you have any advice to those chasing a dream?
Um, I would go back to the friendship piece, I will say, because when I started swimming, I luckily it came pretty naturally to me, and so I knew like pretty soon after I started competitively swimming that I had a dream of going to the Olympics one day. Like that was like my quote in my fifth grade yearbook. Like they asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said I wanted to be an Olympian. But I would not have been able to stick with it if I didn't have friends there because I had so many seasons where I wasn't motivated. I was burnt out. I felt like I didn't want to swim anymore. And I just didn't like it. But the things that would always keep me going back was like, okay, well, if I don't want to go to practice today, like I can't see my friends. So I would always kind of like barter with myself and be like, well, like, okay, yeah, you don't want to swim, but like, don't you want to go have fun with your friends for 2 hours? So I would say that to myself, and then I'd always be like, okay, yeah, like I'm gonna go swim. And then after practice was done, I would always be glad that I went and that I didn't skip. So I would say like have a passion, but you have to have other passions that kind of like surround and nurture that center passion to help like push you when things start getting really, really tough. And for me, that big passion was like the friends that I made. Because yeah, I would have quit so long ago if I didn't have like really, really, really good friendships. So I would say like nurture that side of yourself. Like don't be so laser focused on yourself, and like achieving your goals that like you don't forget to like like stop and smell the roses, I guess, and like have fun with your friends at practice and nurture that and like form bonds that way. Have to say that for sure.
That's awesome. Love that. Love that advice.
Thank you.
Reagan, where are all your medals kept right now?
They are well, one of them's here. I'll grab it. But the other seven Olympic medals are at my parents' house. My mom like keeps a display case. Um, And I don't know, I really wanted it to be with them just because I think it means a lot to them to have that. But I keep one because when I have to travel, sometimes I'll have to like take pictures with it for appearances. So yeah, I keep one with me, which is like super cool. But yeah, all the other ones are with my parents.
Is there, I'm just curious, is there a difference? I mean, obviously the appearance, but is there more details in the gold and the silver?
No, no, yeah, they're exactly the same otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that the Paris Olympics did something unique with their medals compared to the 2021. Is that true?
Well, every year is special because so on the front of the Olympic medal, it's the exact same every single Olympic Games. They have Nike, the goddess of victory, on the front, holding a torch, and they just have um, like the games of like the whatever Olympiad, and then like yeah. So basically, it's the same on the front every single time, but then on the back, they make it personalized to what the host country is. So like for Tokyo, they had some like design imprinted on the back for Tokyo. And then for Paris, they put a piece of the Eiffel Tower on the back of every single medal. So that's what this gray thing is. It's a piece of the Eiffel Tower. So yeah, it's different every single year. But yeah, I thought this was a pretty unique thing that they did.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Reagan, we definitely learned a lot about
I'm glad.
the Olympics in general. I had no idea about the the Olympic Village, or that not every Olympian was at the U.S. was at the ceremony. That's new. That's news to me. I'm glad you shared
Yeah.
that, and I really appreciate your honesty. We really enjoyed that.
Well, thanks. I'm really glad you guys enjoyed it and learned some things. And yeah, I'm sorry for asking if you were being sarcastic, because I guess yeah, I guess you're actually in the place, everyone is like, oh my gosh, like this is such a shit show. But yeah, you forget, like if you're not there and the environment, you don't know. So yeah, apologize for asking if you were being sarcastic. But yeah, it's super fun to talk about things that I guess aren't really covered in the media. So it's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as uh, you know, or might not know, our podcast is all on different platforms. We're on YouTube, which after this is up, it'll be posted on there, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The Sports Mecca podcast. We're also available on Instagram and X, Twitter, whatever you want to call that. But um,
Awesome.
whenever this is up, we'll post it. But again, thank you so much for making an appearance.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really enjoyed this. Hope you have a good night.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Reagan. Great to meet you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. Nice to meet you guys too.